Gentlemen, it is now 4 o'clock p.m. on Thursday, August 15th. I'm calling Police Commission meeting to order at this time, and I invite you all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to table the minutes from July 25th due to a computer error that has the minutes locked up.
Can we table it?
Okay, we have a motion to table, seconded by Commissioner Balboni.
Aye.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Okay, that is approved. This time, Chief Rondo, if you would like to go over the monthly reports, please.
Yes, sir, thank you. This will be an abbreviated ComStat report so we can get into the public session a little bit earlier than we normally do. Commissioners, thank you. Flipping to the first slide in your deck, you're going to see incidence cases year to date 2019. You heard me saying that we've been on an increase since May. You'll see that steady rise. We're up 42.42% from June into July, with 94 new criminal cases investigated this past month, or correction incidents, and the backup data is in your packets, and I'll entertain any questions by exception only as I go through. Moving on to the arrest data, you'll see that we were down slightly from 51 to 41 for July. That's a decrease of 19.60. The reason for that is because as the officers have picked up more cases and investigations, the number of arrests have decreased. That you'll see probably a spike over the next 2 months as they close out some of those 94 incidents and they result in arrest warrants and/or indictments at the Superior Court level. Gentlemen, the backup data is provided in your packets if you have any questions. Moving on to the investigators report, you will see that the investigator has been busy with a number of cases. I'll entertain questions on that by exception. Mr. Chairman, if you have any questions. Sounds good. Moving on to the officer status report, you'll see that reflective of the month of July. As you looked at this listed by officer, as you look through that slide, if you have any questions, just let me know what those are. Again, just remember when you look at an individual officer and his activity, just remember that some officers are on busier shifts than others, and they may not have access to the higher activity levels that are 4 to midnight or 6 to 2 in the morning. Moving on to the next slide in your deck, you're going to see collisions. This is the good news story, if you will, for this ComStat briefing. You'll see in July there was no change. We had 14 crashes in June, 14 collisions in July, 0% change. I would say that 14 from years past is a very good number. Obviously, we want to drive toward 0. That's our goal. That's the goal of New Hampshire highway safety. Anytime we can get that into low double digits or even single digits, it's a very good month. So moving on to the next slide, gentlemen, in your background data, you're going to see the what I call the usual suspects. There's no mysteries there. Most of those crashes occurring on places like Center Street and South and North Main Street. Oh, yes, sir.
Which number is correct? Because this says 15.
So this is correct because this report was run a few days after I did the slide deck, so it's off by 1. So that means that one more officer got his crash report in a little bit after the deadline. So it's 15. So essentially 14 and 15. The background data is included in your packets if you want to see where those accidents are occurring. And then traffic stops year to date. You'll see that we're a little busy in the month of July. We're up almost half by 50.45% jump from June and July, and that's reflective of just the busy summer month, July being one of our busiest months. And again, out of that, 28 tickets were issued out of that 331 traffic stops. That's 8.45% chance of getting a ticket, if you will, so less than 10%. Gentlemen, the background data?
One more question.
Yes, sir.
Or another question, I should say. With the motor vehicle stops and the subsequent summons that were issued, at one point there, I think it was 2 months ago, in the backup data, we had what the offenses were. In other words, we can just tell they're egregious offenses based on the high dollar amount.
That's correct.
But you had gone a little bit further and put in more information on another slide that involved what the actual...
That's correct. That information is included in your background data. There's a second breakdown. It looks like this. It has all that, what the offense was, where it occurred, and then the fine amount associated.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't see that one.
Okay. Gentlemen, subject to your questions, that concludes the ComStat portion of the briefing. If you have any questions, I'll entertain them now.
Nope. I'm all set. Commissioner? Good. Set. Okay, chief's items. Are you prepared to brief those?
I thought we would table those until next month, unless you want me. I'm prepared to go into them, and if you want, but I thought you...
Yeah, we have a couple of minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Mr. Chairman, I have no issues for a non-public session.
Okay.
Moving into the chief's items. Under budget, the command and staff conducted 2 internal FY19 budget reviews this past month. And then we conducted a meeting with the town manager and boss members regarding police budgetary matters. I'm happy to report that all is well, and we're tracking straight and true as of 1 August 2019. So far, we're coming in at just under 5% spent for the end of the 31st week of fiscal year 19 budget in police, and approximately 4% underspent in dispatch. We have started our fiscal year 2020 budget construction as of 6 August, and once I have added in some changes to the budget, I will call for a meeting of our budgetary team, which would include myself, Captain Mark Livy, Sherry Moore, our executive assistant, Selectman Paul O'Brien, budget committee members Thomas Bell and Matthew Planch, and then we'll start the difficult task of putting together the FY 2020 police budget. I just want to emphasize that right now I think we're doing pretty good on the FY19 budget, and strong budgetary controls I think have what contributed us to enjoy that status. But I do want the commission to know that I still have approximately 4 months left of the year, so anything can happen, so stay tuned and buckle up. Under personnel, officers Chris Dustin and Benjamin Church are getting ready for their respective police academy PT test scheduled for 19 August. That's literally right around the corner, so I know that they're nervously waiting that PT test with great anticipation. And for those listening, PT is physical training. They have to pass a physical training test to get into the police academy, and they've been training real hard. The captain's made sure of that. Right, Captain? That's correct. Operations. In terms of police investigations and prosecutions, July was a heavy month for the Wolfeboro PD. The PD is still working on some major investigations and major prosecutions. I expect these matters will persist into the early fall. In terms of police prosecutions this past month, we saw 28 defendants who responded to 29 criminal charges. Of those 29 criminal charges, 18 pled or were found guilty at trial, and 2 were null pros. 1 because the defendant and victim reached a civil agreement, and the second due to the death of a victim witness. 9 defendants agreed to have their cases placed on file pending good behavior for 6 months or more, with diversion, education, and restitution components added to their sentences. The conviction rate for this past month is 96.6%, with approximately $4,587 in fines, penalties, and restitutions meted out. Crime does not pay. Dispatch. Under matters of concern this past month, Wolfeboro Central Dispatch sustained a major and near catastrophic failure of a motherboard, part of the dispatch console. We have taken steps to remediate this problem. Repairs are currently underway. I will continue to keep our officials updated on this most important repair issue. Speed issues continue to be a problem in our community. Please pay attention to the posted speed limits on our town roads. Speed complaints represent some of our most common quality of life issues we receive at the PD. Please be courteous of your friends and neighbors and don't speed. We'll be monitoring our roads very carefully, and if you are speeding, please slow down. The life you save may be your own. That being said, the department is continuing its enhanced speed enforcement operations in the following areas: Forest Road, Cotton Valley and College Road areas, Beach Pond Road with a focus on the areas between Pine Hill Road and North Line Road, Center Street, North Main Street, 109 East Street, 109 East, Bay Street, and Sewell Road. The reason for these speed enforcement operations is due to citizen complaints and data collected and analyzed by our radar trailer and radar warning signs. We will continue our efforts in these areas until we are sure that the speeds have come down. If you travel these roads, please be mindful of the posted speed limits. As a reminder, we just arrested a speeder who was doing 75 in a 30-mile-an-hour zone on North Main Street. A word to the wise, please don't speed. Budget straight and true right now, about 5% underspent as of 1 August, and about 4% underspent on Wolfeboro Central Dispatch. However, please be reminded that we still have approximately 4 months left in the town's fiscal year, and anything can happen. And we've just had some major repair bills in the dispatch for the console. The next update will be in the third quarter during the October Police Commission meeting, and I'll brief the third quarter fiscal year town status for the police department and dispatch at that point. Under our training, Officer Benjamin Church has started OJT with our officers, and he's delighted to be getting ready, and he's preparing for the rigors of the academy. Sergeant Strock has conducted K-9 training this past month, and Senior Patrolman Llewellyn continues to be very active with SRO training and is a trainer down at the Concord SRO Association, so that's good, and we're happy to have him doing that. So matters of interest and outreach, both the captain and I conducted a department staff meeting to put out new guidance. Both the captain and I met with concerned citizens regarding a wide range of issues and community involved topics. The captain spoke on Wolfeboro Community TV this past month with a guest speaker, and that was Principal James Riley. The captain and I continue to be regulars at the men's breakfast meetings each month. The department participated in the Touch a Truck event at the Nick Fest, and all went well, and we're really happy to do that. That's a really good time, and the officers really enjoy that. And I know Officer Llewellyn and Sergeant Strock often make time out of their schedule to do that. The captain and I continue to attend all the boss meetings. The captain continues to be part of the master planning process, the technical review, and joint loss committees. And lastly, please be our guest on Coffee and Connections with the Chief. This program focuses on myself meeting with the captain and other members of our community to talk about topics of interest. And as always, coffee's on me. And a safety tip of the month, pets and automobiles. As the summer wears on, let's be very cautious of our furry friends. Leaving pets and automobiles in this weather is very dangerous. Even on mild summer days, the temps inside the vehicles get extreme. Many of our furry friends have thick coats, and they get hot quickly. Myself and your pets, thank you, and please be mindful of their safety. Please don't leave your pets in hot autos. Thanks. Gentlemen, subject to your questions, that's all I have.
Okay, I'm all set. Joe? Alyssa, you're always over there. Any questions? Okay. Our next meeting will be held on September 19th here at the Great Hall. Okay. In our public session, I'd like to welcome Bree Schutte and Kate McMahon, representing the Carroll County Democrats. They have followed our standard operating procedures and given us some questions written through our secretary, so they did follow the process. They're here today. So I'd like to invite you two up to the microphone so that we could one thing, Bree, before we start. I just want to put this out there as a matter of fact, if you will. Under RSA 105, our meetings are public, are with every board and commission within the town, but also under the right to know law, we're not required to let anybody speak. We choose to do that. Obviously, with what you want to talk about today, we understand that it can become a politically charged I'm going to have a brain cramp. Topic. Thank you. And but with that in mind, I also want everybody to understand that this commission, the police department, and I think I can speak for the Board of Selectmen and every other board and commission in this town, we are apolitical. We don't subscribe to any political party. We are fair. We have no allegiance to anybody. We are here to deal with members of the public, as your liaison to the police department, be at service, at your service when requested. And for the purpose of this meeting, if you will, per your request, we are going to limit discussion between you and Kate and us. This is not going to become a forum. This isn't going to become a debate between opposing views, because that's not what we're here for. So with that being said, I just want that understood so that I don't expect anything's going to happen, but I just wanted to offer that as a precursor. So although I do have the question, the general question that you submitted to Amy, first of all, welcome. We're happy to have you here this afternoon, and we would like to know basically what's on your mind and how we may help you.
Of course. Thank you so much, Steve. Unfortunately, Kate McMahon had a family situation with her two infant grandchildren, so she won't be here. I'll be alone, but thank you for inviting both of us. I do have a copy of my statement that I'll be emailing to Amy later this evening so that it can go into your minutes. And Amy also distributed, I think, she was downstairs printing it out, a handout with some facts that I'll be referring to as part of the statement. So I'll start by reading the written statement, which is relatively brief, and then I'm happy to open it up to questions or a back and forth dialogue, whatever, suits our purposes. So to begin with, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak at Police Commission today and raise the concern of immigrants and our community's treatment of and interactions with the immigrant community. This is clearly a topic of growing concern for many in Wolfeboro, as evidenced by the large turnout of local residents at July's Lights for Liberty event at Pickering Corner. I so appreciate what Steve said in the beginning about trying to make this apolitical, even though I'm here on behalf of the Wolfeboro Democrats, as was Kate McMahon. I don't feel that it is a political issue. I feel that it's a moral and ethical one. However, before going forward, I would like to note my concern that my attendance at this meeting leaked out to various community members on the other side of the issue who engaged in extremely vitriolic and distorting attacks without understanding the substance of what was going to be discussed here. As a self-identified progressive, I believe that free speech of any type should be encouraged. But as recent events in El Paso have shown us, words matter, and words can fan the fire of situations. I would hope that despite political differences that any of us in this room may have, that we would all recognize that we are focused on protecting the interests and well-being of our community, which brings me to the substance of today's remarks. First, I would like to underscore the fact that despite rhetoric on this issue, and an individual who is here in the United States without appropriate documentation is not guilty of any crime, these individuals have simply violated a civil offense. Their legal situation would be the same as a person who violated local Wolfeboro ordinances by not clearing a snowstorm, or by not clearing a sidewalk after a snowstorm, or hundreds of other civil offenses that we may be able to think of. Local police cooperation with ICE is not a new issue of concern for myself, the Democrats, or any other members of the local community. It is an issue that I originally broached with Chief Rondo in the winter of 2017 following a Board of Selectmen meeting. During that conversation, to the best of my recollection, and I'm happy again to discuss this with all of you, Chief Rondo seemed to indicate to me that cooperation with ICE would needlessly stretch the department's already limited budgeted resources and that it would not be a high priority issue. This therefore brings me to the three main points of my statement today. One, many cities, ranging from liberal Chicago to more conservative Milwaukee, to smaller communities, including ones that are Wolfeboro-sized, across the political spectrum, have made the decision to codify how they will deal with ICE requests for cooperation. The vast majority of these communities have made the decision not to support ICE on providing valuable local resources to support deportation activities. This is all predicated on the fact that the individual immigrants in question have not committed a crime by their presence in this country and are simply guilty of a civil offense. Clearly, the conversation and considerations for these local communities are dramatically different if the individual has been charged with a felony crime or is on a terrorism watch list of any sort. Even the state of Connecticut, which has the most immigrant-friendly and protective laws on its books, makes carve-out exemptions for cooperation under these very rare situations. This raises one of the most important questions that I and other members of the community have thought about. If Wolfeboro police were faced with that concrete choice to cooperate with ICE on deporting individuals who solely have an administrative violation, what would the response be? While all of us think about this answer, let me ask you to think about an analogy, a hypothetical one, but one that closely mirrors this situation. Imagine a law enforcement jurisdiction in North Carolina calls and says, Mr. Smith is staying in Wolfeboro at his home this summer. Mr. Smith has failed to mow his lawn in North Carolina, and we have fined him. We would like for you to arrest him and extradite him to North Carolina. What would the response be? As an economist, I can assure you that my response would be that this was a gross misuse of limited resources and severely skewed the cost-benefit question. Point number 2, all statistics, beginning from a 1911 study and including recent studies by more conservative organizations such as the Cato Institute, indicate that immigrants, no matter what their status, documented or undocumented, engage in criminal activity at a much lower rate than any other demographic group. Not only do these immigrants engage in crime at a lower rate than their native-born peers, the communities and neighborhoods in which these immigrants live are dramatically safer. Some of those statistics can be found in the handout that Amy printed out for you. And a final point, and here I am speaking not only from a strong statistical grounding, but also from personal experience. As many of you know, I lived in Russia for almost 10 years. During the first 18 months that I lived in Russia, through no voluntary choice of mine, I was an undocumented individual. During this period, I was also the victim of severe domestic violence. My immigration status prevented me from going to the police for assistance. I lived in terror that I would be deported without my children who had legal and documented status. I no longer trusted the police, and this made me, an extremely vulnerable individual, ever more vulnerable. Statistics bear out my anecdotal experience. Again, referring to the handout, in Houston, for example, where the Houston police have made the decision to actively cooperate with ICE, the number of Latino women who have reported rapes has declined more than 40% in the last 18 months. There is absolutely no indication that this decline is due to improvements in socioeconomic or other conditions. It is simply a fact of spiraling fear on their part. Vulnerable women and children, including victims of human trafficking, are less likely to reach out for assistance, and this escalates their vulnerability and compromises public safety. I am sure all of you who work hard on behalf of the local community want to foster an environment in which people feel free and safe to reach out to you with their concerns and to report being victims of crime. In conclusion, I would like to end with these 3 points, which also potentially start a dialogue on this topic. First, I would like to understand your policies, both as a police commission and police force. If ICE were to request assistance tomorrow in enforcing deportation orders, particularly for individuals who are only guilty of a civil offense, what would the response of the Wolfeboro Police Department be, given our already limited and stretched resources? Second, despite what some hardliners on the other side of this issue have attempted to say, this is only the first step in a long and detailed conversation about what being a sanctuary or safe city really is and what impact this type of designation would have on the community. It is important to remember that for a variety of reasons, including simplifying conversations, that the term sanctuary city is often used as a broad umbrella term. However, realistically, it can be used in many different ways, respecting each individual community's views, needs, and limited resources. And finally, to lay out for you what our next steps are. Our next step is to bring this topic before the selectmen and potentially eventually before the town in terms of a referendum. This conversation with you today is a conversation that is grounded in respect and a recognition, understanding, and extreme appreciation of your essential enforcement role in our community. We would like to understand your positions on this topic and be able to address any concerns that you may have, particularly those related to public safety, and make sure that our efforts moving forward are as bipartisan as possible. As part of this bipartisan effort, I would also underscore to you in closing that the Fraternal Order of Police is increasingly receptive to the concept of safe cities for many of the reasons that I have mentioned above, and increasingly they are recognizing that there are far better uses of communities' stretched and stressed resources. Thank you again, all of you, for your time and giving me the opportunity today.
Thank you, Bree. I think first I'd like to start off with one of your points that you made at the end, which was actually part of your original question that you articulated to Amy when you requested to be on the agenda. And that is our policies and our procedures, if you will, regarding immigration and cooperation and so forth. Quite frankly, we don't have any specific policies that deal with that. This is not something that happens very frequently in Wolfeboro, that there would be an interaction of this sort. I guess I'd have to go back to the fact that, you know, we are a country of laws, and every police officer that takes an oath in the state of New Hampshire, okay, takes an oath to uphold the Constitution, to defend the laws of the state of New Hampshire, and also ultimately the local laws, which are, we all know as our local ordinances. And they take that very seriously. Here in Wolfeboro, we have a culture where the police officers that are in place, the police officers that we want to hire, that we do hire, have to understand the value of community policing. It is important to us that we have a police force that is respectful, approachable, they can be resourceful, they're there to help the public whenever the need should arise. The officers are not out there doing any profiling, they're not judging anybody or looking any differently at somebody that may be of color or may practice a specific religion or no religion at all. None of that goes on here. Everybody is welcome. Everybody has the right to move about freely in the town of Wolfeboro and conduct their business. And I've heard no complaints to the contrary. But going back to when you mentioned interactions and so forth, over the past 24 years roughly, there's probably been a total of maybe 12 interactions. Well, once every couple of years, maybe. And again, we understand that, and you are absolutely correct, that they are just civil offenses. I do not for 1 minute believe that Wolfeboro was on the ICE radar. I think they're looking at bigger metropolitan areas, other places where there's much more of a problem. So the likelihood of them coming in here is not very great. However, back a few years ago, we had an issue with MS-13 where they had stolen a vehicle in Wolfeboro, a chase ensued and so forth. It was determined during the investigation and subsequent arrest that one of those individuals was wanted by an out-of-state entity for other crimes. The police department obviously is very aware of the fact that they can't detain anybody or something like that. In the investigation or subsequent investigation, based on arrests for criminal activity, it could be DWI, something like that, if it's learned that the person it is not legally in the country, for lack of a better term, there are avenues. We don't hold anybody in Wolfeboro anyway. We don't have holding facilities, so everything would go to the county. But in the past, and the chief can correct me if I'm wrong, but typically the point of contact is Border Patrol out of Vermont. And they'll make one of two determinations based on the facts that are presented at that time. And one is, if you have somebody that's overstayed a visa, their attitude is just, if you've got a good address, if they're living in town, that's fine. We'll talk to them, we'll reach out to them and ask them to update, whatever. But if the person has committed a crime, then they may want them because they violated federal law or state law, what have you. And in that case, they still have rights. They're not, right. And those rights are respected. As far as ICE requests for cooperation, at this point in time, I would say yes, we would cooperate. There is nothing contrary in state law, federal law, anything that would preclude us from doing that. But the reason being, there's a myriad of reasons, but one of the issues that we look at, or one of the considerations, I should say, not an issue, is that we derive federal funds every year through grants. And we receive annual allotments every year from the federal government for what I call life safety, where our police force are out working on highway safety grants. Could be DWI interdiction, drug interdiction on the highways. It could be pedestrian safety downtown. There's a variety of things. If the town were to be less cooperative with the federal government, then most likely they're going to be less cooperative with us. As I say, this is not a time or a town where ICE is typically and purposely sought out to come in for any particular reason, other than when we had that one big gang issue that came through. We also have to stay within the confines of the law as directed by the state and federal attorney generals. They are the supreme police for the country and for the state, if you will. They are the ultimate authority. And they don't grant any authority to us or to the police department for detaining anybody for any reason other than criminal activity. So you were right in that point.
I guess if I could just, respond again,
Sure.
In terms of a dialogue here. I understand, I think we all understand that Wolfeboro may not be at the top of the radar screen, but any of us who are active outdoors people know how close the ICE border checks are. 3 times within the last 4 months, I've been stopped on I-93, first at primary checkpoints and then secondary checkpoints. So to say that this isn't necessarily an issue that's creeping closer to our community may not necessarily be fair. And I know, again, there's an interstate issue there's a proximity to the border issue that we don't necessarily have, but this is an issue that is increasingly, touching on our communities and surrounding communities. In terms of what you said about community policing, I know that's one of the things that I value most about the Wolfeboro Police Department and my interactions with them is that they're looking to create positive dialogues and positive communications with members of the community. And trust is so integral in that. So any steps that we can take to enhance trust are so essential. And I think, looking around this room and looking around Wolfeboro, we definitely are not one of the more diverse communities out there. So as people of privilege for various reasons, from it, our socioeconomic status to the color of our skin, our comfort level in approaching the police may be dramatically different than the comfort level of a Brewster student, an immigrant, a person of color who's either here for the day or here, for a longer period of time. So again, any steps that we can take to enhance that trust level, ultimately, I believe, build public safety. To touch on your other point, as many of you know, I'm an economist, so I definitely respect, that budgets matter and fiscal concerns matter. But I'm also a person, and it's a little bit disturbing that the reason that you're providing me for ICE cooperation is concern about financial resources. I almost feel as if the needs of our most vulnerable citizens, if necessary, would be brushed aside to ensure that we would get grants or other money. So I guess that's one of my concerns. And again, I guess the other concern is, yes, it may not be an immediate issue. As you said, it may be an issue that comes up every year or every other year. But maybe now is the time to codify our policies and to think distinctly about what policies we do want to have in place so that the next time that issue does come up, there aren't those questions. I'm a big believer in law and order and rules and having those policies in place.
Okay, I'm not going to deny that I said that there's a financial piece to cooperation, and I should have expounded on some of the other reasons, but there are, throughout the history of the town, there are times when we need those resources at a state or federal level. There are times that they call upon us for our assistance. So it's imperative when we need them. I know it may be a little bit different from your perspective than from the police perspective, but when you're trying to solve crimes, you're trying to do your business, and you need other resources. And we may not have the laboratory, ability to do forensics and things like this at the local level, but we have other agencies that we can reach out to. And cooperation is a huge thing in law enforcement. It runs the gamut, not just in this town, not just in the state, but all over the country. So it's not purely a financial thing. That was just one of the points that I wanted to make. And that is an important part of what we do, though, here in Wolfeboro. We believe in life safety and keeping our people safe in the town. So, we do want people out there working, and, when I say working, we want the police officers, the staff, trying to keep the public safe, whether it's, and one of the things that we've always said is, the department tries to be educational more than it is punitive. So if they're doing a grant on pedestrian safety and they're down there speaking with the people that love to jaywalk, it's for their own safety. We don't want anybody being injured or worse downtown. And talking about resources, we don't budget annually for that type of work. We have the regular police work that we budget for, so these people work 40 hours a week, et cetera, et cetera. The grants allow us to take another sum of money and put people to work at other times to ensure public safety, and that's what that piece is for.
And I definitely respect that cooperation is an essential part of law enforcement work across, all levels and across all jurisdictions. I think my concern, and maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, is that cooperation, be it that financial piece or that other piece, is going to take precedence if ultimately push came to shove over these incredibly vulnerable individuals. And I think that's where our concern
I think,
comes up.
and my fellow commissioners can chime in, I think if there was an issue or an incident with somebody, that needed some help, some assistance, they're going to get it. We're not going to turn our back on anybody. I know that's not how this police department operates. But one of the other things that we have to look at too, though, is, you talk about policies and procedures, okay? The way that the state of New Hampshire is set up currently, okay, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say it's a trickle down. You've got the federal law coming down to state law. Now, in the New Hampshire Constitution, when that was crafted, at the time the legislature felt it important that the state hold majority of the responsibility for the law of the state, and they gave a smaller amount for the local boards and so forth. And so because of that, towns are very limited. For example, you probably are aware of the 23 enumerated powers of a Board of Selectmen, okay? So they have certain areas that they can make decisions in that won't violate any laws or anything like that, or any regulations. And the same thing holds true for us. The commission, the police commission, operates, we follow the rule of law. We follow the state statute that formulated specifically the Wolfeboro Police Commission and the roles and responsibilities contained therein. And we also follow the standard operating procedures that we've developed for managing our meetings and interacting with the public and so forth. We don't have, and this is, I think, something that I think everybody in the public needs to understand. We don't have a legal right, we don't have any authority to dictate what the chief does with his resources. And let me clarify that. We are in charge of all things fiduciary with the police department. We are charged with overseeing the government of the police department. But as far as day-to-day operations, that responsibility falls solely on the police chief. And whether or not it's a community in the state of New Hampshire that has a police commissioner or not, there is nobody in that community that can give direction. You can suggest, but they cannot give direction to a chief of police on how to deploy those resources or how to enforce the law. So we can't craft a policy, if you will, or direction for the police chief to do things any differently than conform with the rule of law as it stands now. I think that may be a little bit, I hate the microphones. It may be a little bit tougher too, because we're not a home rule state. I'm not sure, I'm sure you're familiar with home rule, but we're not a home rule state, so that creates a whole nother set of issues when you're trying to address certain situations.
But there's absolutely no statute that can be pointed to in state or federal law that would predicate the need to cooperate with ICE on a civil deportation order.
If and when that happens, and I'll let the chief speak to this, but should ICE make a request of the police department, that is entirely within his purview. That's not within our purview or our direction. It wouldn't fall on the Board of Selectmen either. They have no legal standing in that matter, nor does the town manager. That is entirely up to him. And at the time, he's going to act, I'm assuming, in what is the best interest of all parties. But Chief, I'll let you speak to that if you would, please.
Thank you. Yeah, Bree, you're absolutely correct. No one's challenging the civil aspect of it. We totally understand it's a civil detention. We get it, and we're not authorized. And please understand that we know we're not authorized, right? We don't do anything with immigration enforcement. That is immigration, and let me just say this loud and clear so everybody understands it, right? Immigration is the purview of the federal government, right? That is the sole purview of the federal government. You go back, look at Article 4, Section 2 and 6 of the U.S. Constitution, you go into naturalization, you go into the commerce clauses, you can look, naturalization, immigration, and everything that goes with it is the purview. Since 1808, if you look at the federal challenges to the Supreme Court, to the present. On immigration and naturalization, the Supreme Court has ruled in favor of the federal government in every single one of those cases. It's clear, right? This is not the purview of the states. It is certainly not the purview of municipal law enforcement. This is not what we do, right? It's just clearly not what we do.
Sorry to interrupt for 1 second.
Sure.
Other communities around the country have taken a stand on this issue, as I noted.
I can't-
Chicago, Milwaukee,
Sure,
down the line. The whole state of Connecticut has taken a stand on this issue.
I'm sure they have. I don't doubt that. All I'm saying is that we don't do anything in immigration. We don't do anything relative to that. It's not our purview. That's not what we do. You're absolutely correct. We have very limited resources, right? My resources are spread out across the town doing speed enforcement. You heard some of that today.
Right,
They're
of
doing
course.
investigations. They're doing criminal investigations, burglary and theft and bad checks. And, we're general law enforcement, right? We do a little bit of everything across the board relative to, crime prevention, physical security, criminal investigations, those types of things. We don't burden ourselves, trouble ourselves with immigration. It's a civil status offense, number one. Number two, we don't have the authority. I can't detain on that. I cannot make an arrest on that. We are not going to make an arrest on that because I have no authority to do it. I only do what I have authority to do. All right?
But I guess I feel like the question, maybe I'm not
Hang
articulating
on.
it clearly. But
Can I finish?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. So having said that, the example that you put forth, right, will we cooperate with ICE or border or whatever the case may be, first of all, I would say that any request is not likely to come to the Wolfeboro Police Department. It's most likely going to go to the state police, right? But let's say in your example, which is not likely. I mean, this is not very likely. There's no major thoroughfares through here. This is just not going to happen. We would seek guidance. The Wolfeboro, I would call the county attorney and ask her to confer with the state's attorney general. He would most likely have to contact the U.S. attorney and find out what is the legal guidance. What can we do? The county attorney is the lead law enforcement officer in the county, and the attorney general for the state of New Hampshire, General McDonald, is the lead law enforcement officer for the state. They would have to issue guidance. Absent guidance, we're not really going to do anything, Bree, and you need to understand that. Our role, if any, in a support to an operation like that would be probably very limited to peace enforcement, right? Just keeping the peace. Will we be kicking in doors and arresting people without proper papers? No, that's not what we're going to do. That's not what we're authorized to do. We clearly don't have the authority. We're not deputized federal agents. We're not doing that, okay? So I think those fears on your part are commendable, but I don't think they're likely to occur anytime in the near future here. We don't have that dynamic. It's not like we're a border community. If we were down in, say, Nogales area of Arizona, or Douglas in Arizona, or El Paso, or on the border with in San Diego, for example, there are different procedures down there where law enforcement can go get that deputized training and do that and have the legal authority to do that. We don't. We won't. It's not in our purview. And the last thing I'm going to say is that any request for assistance from the federal government usually comes with federal dollars attached, right, to cover the cost of those resources, okay? You hit the nail on the head right up front. I am not resourced for those types of operations, or whatever support, even if tomorrow Border Patrol or ICE were to come up and say, hey, we would like your assistance, the answer may be, yeah, I'd like to help you, but I can't. I don't have any personnel. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's really what it's all about. Okay, I can't give them people I don't have, right? If they're not on the clock, I can't give them to them, right? So I think for all of those reasons, the likelihood of us supporting an operation like this, even if we wanted to, is probably very limited, very limited. Now, I will tell you that my dealings with border and ICE in the past, where we've arrested members of MS-13 or we've arrested illegal aliens who have been in violation of law, real laws, whether they're trafficking in arms or they're trafficking in drugs or burglary or what have you, sexual assaults that we've arrested. Usually, they have more than enough personnel to come down here. When they come down, even Border Patrol comes down, they come down with a platoon. So I'm not sure that they really are going to need the Wolfeboro Police Department to do a checkpoint on Route 28. It's just not. They may let us know, hey, we're doing a checkpoint, and we'll say, fine, knock yourself out, go have fun. If you need some water, let us know. We'll bring some water for you. But aside from that, Bree, with all levity aside, it's just not likely to happen. I mean, it's infinitesimal.
And thank you for that response. I guess our final question then is, assuming, as we spelled out, our next steps, assuming our next step was to try and move forward with the referendum labeling Wolfeboro a safe city, and specifying that by safe city, it meant no enforcement of deportation orders that were civil, carving out those exemptions, like I mentioned, under Connecticut law. Given that sort of definition, given the fact that I think we can all agree that immigrants commit crimes at lower rates, immigrants, benefit communities in a variety of ways, if we moved forward with that sort of referendum, would the police be actively opposed to it? And what, in the case that you were actively opposed to it, what sort of steps could we take on our side to allay any of the fears and concerns?
So I really can't speak to that, number one, because I don't know what my officers are going to think one way or the other. I can't control their thoughts. As far as I'm concerned, that's not a matter for the Wolfeboro Police Department. That is clearly a policy issue. It's above my pay grade. It rests with leaders in the town. It's not in my purview. We wouldn't take a position on that one way or the other. We salute the flagpole and drive on with the airborne mission, whatever it may be. So I'm going to respectfully decline to say we don't have a position.
Okay.
Okay, we just, we'll answer questions, we'll weigh in, we'll provide data where we can, but we stay away from policy-type decisions like that. Quite frankly, it's not my purview.
Okay, and thank you for saying that about that. A dialogue can be opened if we do move forward in that direction with, exchanges of concerns or, any sort of data that was available.
I certainly think your compassion and that of the others that are here to support you is commendable. But the one thing I just want to emphasize is that something that Commissioner Chairman Steve Wood said, look, this is a very open community. We're very respectful of all of our citizens, guests, and visitors. We're not actively seeking papers on individuals or questioning their authenticity or their nationality or anything else. If we find, obviously, that someone is in the country illegally because they have committed a crime, they've been arrested, then we take the appropriate action, which means that we notify the appropriate federal authorities. What Commission Chairman Wood said earlier is very true. We rely very heavily on our partners in the federal government. Often, we work these cases jointly with the FBI, with the DEA, with IRS Criminal Division. We work with the Secret Service a lot on things. We work with the U.S. Marshal's Office a lot on cases, on joint cases. So we will continue to work with our federal partners when and where it's in the best interest of protecting the safety and security of the citizens of Wolfeboro. We will always do that. And so I just want to emphasize that we have a responsibility, a very serious and solemn responsibility, to protect the constitutional rights of all of our citizens, residents, and guests. And we do that fairly and impartially, okay? And I can't emphasize that enough, all right?
And I guess one final question to you. As you said, you know, in case of that approach, the hypothetical that I spelled out, you'd be seeking guidance from Michaela and other people in the county attorney's office. Given that, I'm assuming when and if these requests came in, they're somewhat time sensitive. Again, it goes back to the question, why not seek out the guidance proactively? Why not have a policy in place proactively on how you would be dealing with these civil offense sorts of situations?
I think it's going to be very difficult to craft a policy that is going to give us the freedom to act where we need to act, and then to constrain where it needs to be constrained. To be quite honest with you, I think that's going to be really, really hard to do, number one. Number two, I don't think it's needed, to be quite honest with you. I don't see it as an issue. I don't see it as a problem. Any request for support like that, which I've been here 23 years, we've never received anything like that. And I suspect in another 23 years, we're not going to receive anything like that. That is so far afield of what we're likely to get. We would have to run any request like that. Even if that came out of the blue tomorrow, first of all, it wouldn't come directly to me. It would be funneled through the Attorney General's office at a minimum. But we would forward it. If we got a request like that, we would forward it to the Attorney General's office and say, hey, what do you want us to do? Where can we act? I can't violate state law, and we certainly don't want to violate federal law. So I'm just not seeing this as a very likely scenario. In fact, I don't think it's ever going to happen.
If I may just...
Yeah, of course, Steve.
The microphone. I always forget the microphone. Your point about a procedure, if you will, or something like
Right.
that, and then crafting something to move forward with establishing this town as a safe city, as you said. The police department, should that come to fruition, obviously attached with it would be certain guidelines. As with any ordinance that the Board of Selectmen develop and enact, then it becomes the duty of the police department to enforce those ordinances and to, you know, I know we see a lot. Unfortunately, because of the way that the news is these days, we never hear about the good news stories and there's a lot more of those when it involves police officers and their interactions with the community. It's when that few bad acts occur that the press grabs a hold because it's sensational, and that, negativity sells more than positivity, unfortunately. But if you're successful in your endeavor, then there's going to be things that are going to be attached with that, and then we will have to abide by that and enforce that. But our police department, as many, and I hope most or all, as it should be, operate within the parameters of the law. And one, because of a lack of staffing, quite frankly, we don't have the time to go out and just look for things like that.
Right.
It's not part of what we do, nor is it the type of image that we want to portray. We are a community, as you know, that is very heavily dependent upon our summer residents, on our visitors, tourism, a huge part of this community. I'm a native here. I've lived this my entire life, and I know the value, and there's a reason why I met my wife out of town, but we opted to raise our children here. We love this community. So I'm a very, very strong proponent of approachability, respectability. We want our police officers as true ambassadors for the town of Wolfeboro, not out there harassing the general public because they have nothing better to do,
Exactly. And I mean, just to respond to your comment about positivity, I hope that no one either there or behind me perceives us being here as a sign of negativity. In fact, it's the opposite. We're here because we value the work that you do and want to make sure that there is a dialogue on this issue and that we're not alienating people who are on the front lines. So just want to underscore it, that we're here out of positivity and ultimate respect for you guys. And also just to quickly respond to one thing that Chief Rondo said, you know, and I think everyone else would hope that in the next 23 years, there's not a request, that you've gone the 23 years without, and you'll go another 23 years. But I think we all recognize that the debate and conversation surrounding this topic and how heated it's become is dramatically different in these last 2 years than it was in the 23 years before that. So simply going on past history doesn't necessarily give me 100% confidence that the future will replicate, you know, the past in terms of those, you know, the lack of requests. But again, you know, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the information and, you know, feedback. And I'm happy to, you know, continue this dialogue at a later date or answer, you know, anyone's comments, questions, or, you know, concerns. I think all of us, wherever we lie on the political spectrum, have the same goal of making our community as safe and positive as possible, and particularly making it as safe and positive as possible for those of us who are, for whatever reason, be it our ethnicity, our passport, the color of our skin, or our gender, more vulnerable than others are.
Thank you.
Bree, thank you so much for coming. One moment, please, Bob. I think it's important in any community, but I find it vitally important in this community that there is a dialogue. When there's a concern, when there's an issue that should be discussed, that the proper steps, if you will, are followed and all the proper players are brought into the game. It favors everybody.
Right.
You know, you may have been headed down in a certain direction with your endeavor that may have been contrary to the law, just as an example, or may not. Or there may be some other board or commission that you need to speak with along the way that may give guidance that might be a little bit different than what you were envisioning or what you were believing. So it is good to have a dialogue and to get everybody involved in that. But I do thank you for coming here today, and I hope that we've satisfactorily answered the questions
Yes.
that you had. The end of the day, I guess, in a nutshell, other than the topic of interaction with federal authorities in the context of immigration, you know, that going beyond that and trying to do a safe city or something like is way beyond our purview.
Of course.
So anyway.
And this was, again, I understand that this wasn't the forum for safe cities, but as Mr. Wood said, it is the forum to begin to get information from all of the stakeholders, recognizing that there are multiple stakeholders here with very different ideas. And ultimately, the more information that can be solicited from people with different opinions, the better the ultimate solution will be, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bree. Bob? Oh, yeah, could you go up there, please? Give your name, please, for the record.
Robert Brennan, resident. I'm a resident here. I'm also a retired police officer from California, 31 years. So my expectation would be if my law enforcement agency here got a call from any legitimate law enforcement agency, whether it be Alton or Conway, the federal government or the state, and they said, we're coming down because we need that guy, my expectation would be that my police department would cooperate with that, no matter who they are. Yes. That's not the same. If somebody's arrested, no, wait a minute.
Oh, okay, Bob, step back to the microphone, please. This is not what I wanted to happen. I understand this. I understand what he is saying, and I understand your position. I'm not sure that you both are understanding each other.
That's right, because you don't like my opinion, right? I don't like your opinion. I'm just saying, see, now you're not letting me talk.
Okay,
right?
okay, stop.
Did I sit there silently
Bob.
for a half an hour?
Mr. Brennan?
Right?
Mr. Brennan, please. Okay, I understand what you're saying, and I'm of the same mindset that you, that the law enforcement agencies will comply with that request the best that they can, until otherwise directed to do differently. But now, California has a lot of safe cities. They operate differently than the state of New Hampshire does, which I'm sure you're aware of, you know. But in your assessment, yes, or in your point, you're absolutely true. Whether it's any other agency requesting our help, or we request help from outside agencies, there is an expectation of reciprocity and
If somebody is arrested for a crime,
arrested,
For a crime.
correct, for a crime.
and my police department, the sheriff's department, the state, gets a call from the federal government that says, we want to talk to that person, we'll send you a lawful detainer, hold on to them until I get there, I would expect that they hold on to that person. That's my expectation.
I believe you're right, and if they don't, there could be an obstruction of justice charge following if they choose to cut that person loose after they've been directed.
And the mowing the lawn thing has nothing to do with any of this stuff.
Right.
That it would be some kind of municipal ordinance that is not enforceable in the state of New Hampshire.
That was just an example. I think that was just an illustrative point. I mean,
That's right.
it wasn't anything that was.
And my other opinion is that if you're here illegally, whether you consider it a civil violation or not, my personal belief is that even if it is a fact that they commit less crime, they shouldn't be committing any crime here. That's my personal opinion. That
Well, nobody should.
That
We
should
all
be
know
a
that.
0%.
Right. Nobody should.
So to lessen that, saying they commit less crime than people that are born here, that's nothing to me.
Okay.
They should be committing no crime.
All right.
Mr.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman.
I appreciate that. No, I'm going to suspend. This is not a political forum. I'm sorry? Yeah, it's not a political forum. It's not a debate. I don't want back and forth.
Mr. Chairman?
No, I will grant you, sir, an opposing view, if you will. We spoke with Bree, directly with Bree. I allowed him to speak. I will give you some time. You have 5 minutes or less. 5 minutes is what we allow, but
Before you do that, could I,
1 second, sir.
could I address something that Mr. Brennan said?
Oh, yes.
Bob, in answer to your question, I will tell you that based off the numbers that Chairman Wood read earlier in those incidents that occurred going back to about 1996, in every single one of those individuals were in the commission of a crime. Well, again, whether it was drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, felony auto theft, DWI, that's how we tripped across them. They were in the commission of a crime. Another fellow was breaking into Brewster Academy. Years ago, we noticed that their status, their legal status, was apparent. They had committed a crime. In many cases, those were felony-level crimes. We contacted Border Patrol. Border Patrol did issue a detainer. They were taken up. They were secured up at the county jail, and they were turned over to federal authorities for whatever process awaited those individuals. So I do get it, and we do that. If there is a commission of a crime, those individuals are arrested just like any other citizen would be, and then the process moves forward. So that's how it works.
Sir, would you state your name for the record?
Sure. I'm Gary Schutte, Bree's dad.
Okay.
I was a teacher in Minnesota for 28 years.
There you go.
Better?
Yes, much.
Okay, I was a school teacher in Minnesota for 28 years. The school I taught in wasn't even a majority white school. We're very multicultural. Words do matter. They're not illegal immigrants. They're undocumented immigrants. They're not illegal aliens. They're undocumented immigrants. And if we stick to that and keep that in mind, they're undocumented.
Understood.
Undocumented immigrants, not illegal aliens. No one is saying that if someone commits a crime, the Wolfeboro police shouldn't do their cooperation piece Absolutely the opposite. What we're saying is there are too many reports of ICE showing up at doors without, an arrest warrant signed by a judge. That's the concern.
In Wolfeboro?
No, just,
Oh, okay.
nationwide. That's the concern. No one is saying there shouldn't be cooperation. But let's keep in mind the cooperation should be done and I trust Dean Rondo that it will be done by the letter of the law. Undocumented immigrants have the same constitutional rights that those of us who are citizens have.
Thank you, sir. Okay. You may ask a question, yes.
Hi, I'm Charlene Seibel. I live in Wolfeboro. I realize I could probably ask Dr. Google this, but just out of curiosity, looking at of course, I live in far north Wolfeboro, about 8 miles as the crow flies from Pickering Corner. Are we within the 100-mile jurisdiction of ICE and CBP? I know that there's on the western side of the state, there have been local police departments who've been cooperating on, on a lot of the border patrol stops and whatnot. And I know that they're legally allowed to have those checkpoints within 100 miles of the Canadian border. So I was just wondering where our town, with our northernmost town line, where we fit into that. I mean, because if it doesn't mean that there couldn't be, a situation where, people were, ICE or CBP could be in any community in New Hampshire, just looking for undocumented immigrants. But I'm just wondering if we fall within that 100-mile limit.
I'm not aware of it. Are you, Chief?
So I'm not sure where you're getting the 100-mile limit from. That may be a general operating principle that they operate under. I will tell you that Border Patrol and ICE have jurisdiction throughout the United States. So they can go anywhere to do whatever it is that they're required to do.
Correct. I understand that, but
Now, in terms of checkpoints and so forth, I'm unfamiliar with the legal, because I've never participated in one. I'm unfamiliar with their legal requirements, what they have to do to, say, have a checkpoint on Route 93, or if they decided they wanted to have a checkpoint on Route 28. I don't know what they have to do.
Or Route 16.
Or Route 16 or anywhere else. I have no idea what they have to do. I'm assuming, at a minimum, they would have to get a court order. I know if I wanted to do, for example, a DWI checkpoint or a drug interdiction checkpoint, I would have to get a court order from the courts allowing me to do that. I'm assuming they would have to do the same thing as well. But I will tell you that Border Patrol and ICE can operate anywhere. If they have reason to believe that a wanted person or someone has committed a crime, or they're doing whatever their operations are, they can operate wherever they so choose to within the jurisdictional limits of the United States.
I understand that, and I, that's why I'm asking the question, because, various news reports I've read about the checkpoints on 89 and 93, they refer to this magical 100-mile from the border thing, and
That may be a tactical piece of guidance that they operate under that's internal to them, but I would think that they could do a checkpoint anywhere.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Okay, what I would like to do right now is, we did have a request. I forgot about this when we were going through our order. Do this under commission items. We have a letter here from Teresa Tavares requesting a copy of the 2018 contract agreement between the Town of Wolfeboro and the Wolfeboro Police Commission. as recognized by the New England, okay. This is worded a little bit incorrectly, but the inference is they'd like a copy of the contract. She is actually the president of the ASME union, made this request, so I have no problem providing the information. It's public information anyway, the contract. Police union contract and the pay matrix. Yep. But I think it was a formal.
We'll make sure she gets it, sir.
And, well, just to make it I want to entertain a motion to do that.
Got a vote on it.
All right, moved by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Mr. Balboni. All in favor? Aye. Okay. We don't have a non-public session. Mr. O'Brien, anything from the Board of Selectmen?
Yep, the chief was in for his CIP review last week. We learned that you had a console problem and you were out scrounging parts. The chief did a phenomenal job. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Chief did a good job on CIP, but one of the things that related to this issue, you had to literally go out and buy parts, keep the console on life support. I've asked you guys to think about. We have this in other parts of our town as well. You probably ought to stockpile some maintenance spares and come back with some kind of an idea of what's going to cost you to do that. I mean, we have this with police console or dispatch console. We have this with a couple of other pieces of very important hardware in our town that with God forbid we lose that hardware, we're out of Schlitz. And what the chief has told us is they're not making this thing anymore. And I really don't think it would be good for us to be out on eBay trying to find a circuit board.
No.
We probably should get ahead of that a little bit if we possibly can. But his appropriation request was teed up at CIP, and that'll move right down through the activity. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
Glad you're able to join us. Captain, anything? Chief?
No, sir.
Melissa, you all set? Any questions of anyone? You all set? Oh, thank you. No, we're an open forum. We're happy to be here and talk to anybody about any subject. As I said, we're apolitical. Everybody in this room has a political affiliation of some sort, I'm sure, and that's for outside. But we're in here. We're one big happy family, and everybody's opinion matters. And I do think it's important to have a dialogue. I applaud them for their endeavor. They've got a lot of work to do. They're going to hit a lot of roadblocks, unfortunately, I think, because just the way that the laws are written. But that's all well beyond our purview, So, okay, at this time I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
All right, we have a move. We have a second. All in favor? Aye.